Today on Sekulow, we break down the most disturbing and shocking moments at day one of the DNC.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Sekulow. We want to hear from you. Share and post your comments or call 1-800-684-3110. And now your host, Jordan Sekulow.
All right, folks, welcome to Sekulow. We are taking your calls to 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. Later in the broadcast, we're going to get into this issue, abortion. I know which we discussed yesterday with our brief filed in Massachusetts, but also on display last night at the Democrat National Convention. We're going to be talking about that with CeCe Howell from our team at the ACLJ. We'll talk more about politics, too, with Rick Grenell later in the broadcast. And I want to hear from you, too, if you tuned in last night to the DNC or you've seen the clips and seen the commentary. One thing is it was a very long – listen, these conventions are always long. They go pretty late into the night. But what happened with the DNC is last night, usually at least the keynote speaker, who was supposed to be Joe Biden last night, gets in before, 11 o'clock at night. On, I think, Central Time it was 11, right. So Eastern Time after midnight. But his speech was not over until after midnight Central Time. So, I mean, you're talking about 1 a.m.-ish on the Eastern Time. And, again, you brought up, Will, that this was all supposed to be about joy and this kind of like the opposite of what the Republican convention was. And it's not about anger. It's not about gripes and issues. And yet everyone that spoke yesterday was angry. I mean, they were, from what we saw, angry. There was a lot of intense rhetoric, a lot of screaming, a lot of shouting. And, again, it doesn't seem like joy to me.
That's right, and we'll play clips of this to break them down for you as we go throughout the broadcast. But as we've seen, the tone was supposed to be joy from this Harris campaign. She's been saying it on the campaign trail. Tim Walz, they've been trying to cast as this kind of happy-go-lucky running mate, and he has his goofy way he comes out on stage. But for night one, to set the tone of the entire convention, it was a lot of anger, a lot of yelling, a lot of demonization. There wasn't a lot of the Obama-style hope that they're trying to cast the Harris campaign as. Because if you think back to the 2008 convention when Barack Obama was selected, you knew that there was no way that John McCain could beat him, mainly for a lot of the political temperature, but the fact that the emotion was completely different at that convention. It was not this demonization and yelling convention, but that's what we saw last night. So all these attempts to convey this as a Obama 2.0, a hope and change kind of feel, a joy campaign, that is not what came through on night one at the DNC.
And it's an abortion convention. We're already seeing today, when in the background of before the DNC, before the convention of night two begins, you have both of the Obamas speaking tonight. But there's still big reproductive health. That's also known as abortion. That is wording that is showing up on the staging. And you wonder, we're going to talk through last night of kind of how they displayed that last night, Will, and the misinformation they utilized to try and scare voters away from the Republicans when it comes to issues like life. But really, it wasn't the people that were speaking, giving their personal experiences. All three of those ultimately would not be something that we would usually consider as outside the exceptions that are generally accepted from the pro-life community and people like President Trump. So they couldn't find people that wouldn't fall under general Republican, conservative, and even pro-life organizations and the exceptions they support. But, Will, we do see that language popping up yet again inside the convention hall, which it might be part of the theming every single night.
That's right. And as we know, Planned Parenthood had that mobile bus where you could get free abortions outside with the weird ads that said beep, beep, and tried to make it like some sort of like almost lighthearted thing that you could go sign up to get at the DNC. Clearly, they think that's the winning issue for them. So, as you said, Jordan, I expect we will see a lot more of that in the days ahead at the DNC.
It's shocking how at the DNC yesterday that taking the lives of the unborn is celebrated. At the ACLJ, we're dedicated, as you know, to defending life. It's why we launched our Life and Liberty Drive, where a group of ACLJ members have agreed to match your gifts. Now, as we battle the left's radical abortion agenda, we want you to fight with us at aclj.org.
Vice President and Democratic nominee for President Kamala Harris, making a brief appearance on the first night of the convention, ready with her campaign cry.
Let us always remember, when we fight, we win.
Harris also thanking President Joe Biden.
Joe, thank you for your historic leadership, for your lifetime of service to our nation, and for all you will continue to do. We are forever grateful to you.
The president passing the torch to his vice president, Kamala Harris. They're watching on.
Selecting Kamala was the very first decision I made when I became our nominee. And it was the best decision I made my whole career. Border encounters have dropped over 50%. In fact, there are fewer border crossings today than when Donald Trump left office. We've gone from economic crisis to the strongest economy in the entire world. Finally deliver a ceasefire and end this war. Those protesters out in the street, they have a point.
Donald Trump would be able to weaponize the Department of Justice to go after his political opponents. He could even turn the FBI into his own personal police force. That is not how it works in America. That's how it works in dictatorships.
He made his own kind of history, the first person to run for president with 34 felony convictions.
Welcome back to Sekulow. So a week that was supposed to be big for Joe Biden. It's so bizarre to say that, he spoke last night. CNN said it was the old Lions' last roar. Then someone else on CNN said, I wish it was just a little shorter.
Right.
Because it got close to an hour long. It was already, the difference between the Republicans and Democrats, I do think is the difference is they'll just kind of go on and go on and go on and go on and even take people off. Did James Taylor never got to play?
Didn't see it.
Yeah, I mean, so things like that, and yet they kind of expect people to just stick with it. Whereas Republicans, again, they've got the schedule, they stick with it, they get the people through. And again, it was interesting because Joe Biden in this Lions' last roar was very angry sounding. It was a lot of screaming. There was just a lot of that last night, even from Hillary Clinton that we heard.
Right.
Well, so it was. We got not just Joe Biden, but we got Hillary Clinton as a comeback too on night one. And listen, I think a lot of people, because of how late this got, probably didn't even watch, even if they were trying to, most of Joe Biden's speech, depending on where they live in the country, depending on what part of the country you live in. You may have seen Hillary Clinton's or not. And again, I think you bring these people back on the first night so that you're not addressing them by the final night.
That's right. And as you mentioned, it drug on as I was watching when there kept being moments. I'm like, oh, this is the person that's going to introduce Joe Biden. Because a lot of the in-between programming, the smaller names, you don't know who's next. They kind of try to keep it a surprise when Jamie Raskin comes out. But then, so Chris Coons was up there. I'm like, that would make sense. They are very close. They have a close relationship. Nope, it wasn't him that introduced him. Then Jill Biden gets up there. Wasn't her. Then finally, Ashley Biden, his daughter, was the one who introduced the president. But we're going to start a little bit earlier in the night with this bite. This was when Hillary Clinton decided to turn something that was used against her on Donald Trump. And let's just take a look at this and see how the tone was set on this joyful DNC.
Yeah.
Donald Trump fell asleep at his own trial. And when he woke up, he made his own kind of history, the first person to run for president with 34 felony convictions. As vice president, Kamala sat in the Situation Room.
This, you see a very creepy smile from the former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, former First Lady, with that lock him up chant, Jordan, that was something that was so unbecoming of Donald Trump in 2016. Obviously, he did not lock her up, but now they are celebrating, and she's joyfully smiling. This is the lady who took classified documents and bleach-bitted them from her devices.
Again, Hillary Clinton would be just as angry at a lot of these FBI actors and how they treated her campaign as Donald Trump, because it was Jim Comey who came back days before the election, and reopened the investigation into Hillary Clinton days before the presidential election. It certainly is going to have an effect when something like that is done. And yet they kind of forget that part of history. They forget the history that the deep state was even utilizing bad actions and bad decisions that were injuring them and that would anger them. And it's all focused on Donald Trump and his 34 convictions. Listen, I think last night, in one sense, you had to let Joe Biden have his hour-long-ish speech. Yeah. At the same time, the people's attention on a convention, if you want to go by nights, the least attention is going to be on the first night. I mean, probably Joe Biden got some extra attention, some extra eyes, because he is the current president of the United States. And as you said, well, this is so kind of unprecedented to have a sitting president, who was not assassinated or something like that, decide not to run again, even though they won the nomination. They went through the process to get the nomination again, and yet they decided very late in the process, after a presidential debate with Donald Trump, that, oh, you know what, I'm not going to run again. In fact, we're going to give this to Harris. He said, of course he wasn't pressured to do that. I don't think anyone believes that. And then you see his attitude was extremely aggressive last night.
Right. Well, and we talked about the weaponization of these agencies. This was a state senator that I don't know if they think she's a rising star in the party, but somehow she got a speaking slot on the first night of the DNC. This is Mallory McMorrow from Michigan. She's a state senator there. And as Rick Grenell always says, if the Democrats accuse you of doing something, they're probably doing it themselves. The fact that they are so unself-aware with a statement like this, let's go ahead and play bite 2.
Donald Trump would be able to weaponize the Department of Justice to go after his political opponents. He could even turn the FBI into his own personal police force. That is not how it works in America.
You're Barack Obama or Joe Biden.
That's right.
Because when you're Barack Obama, you took the IRS into your own force, and they went to the FBI, and they went to people like Jack Smith at the DOJ to try and get Tea Party activists prosecuted criminally. So it happened to the Obama administration. And then we know there was the weaponization that has taken place, whether it's the agents showing up at people's door, pro-life protesters' door, going into places of worship undercover. That we have seen the weaponization most recently. I think the highest and worst level has been against Donald Trump himself, with all these different cases, and whether it's the 2 federal cases, 2 civil cases that out there, Georgia and New York. You've got, of course, New York City criminal, and you've got, of course, the federal case out of Washington, D.C. So who weaponized the Justice Department? It was the Obama administration. Following up, then it was followed by the Biden administration, who continued to weaponize the justice system against President Trump, and they continue to do so to this day. I mean, it's like when Harris was talking about inflation really only being an issue the last 3 years, and you're like, well, the only people that have been in office are you and Joe Biden.
That's right.
At the executive level. So all of these issues, the Department of Justice has been weaponized. Lawfare has begun in the United States. It started with the Tea Party and the IRS, but if you want to look at individuals and politicians utilizing it against other politicians who may be a threat to their power, you look at what has happened to Donald Trump. So shame on that state senator for forgetting what history actually shows. That it has been Republicans who have had to put up with this lawfare launched against Republicans and conservative activists since President Obama was in office. But I doubt we're going to hear much about that tonight from Barack Obama or his wife, former First Lady Michelle Obama.
That's right. And as one of our producers pointed out, they called Eric Holder Barack Obama's wingman. The Attorney General of the United States, the one who was responsible for such wonderful accomplishments like Fast and Furious, where they ran guns to Mexico and lost them all, and then those guns were used by the cartel in crimes. That's the gun control party. They were losing weapons of war, as they like to call them.
Bill Clinton was meeting with the next Attorney General, Loretta Lynch.
Letitia James. Oh, yes, right. Sorry, Loretta Lynch.
On the tarmac. I mean, like, while they're being investigated, it is, to me, it's just infuriating the way they try to rewrite history and hope that those watching just don't remember or that you just don't care. Because if you have Donald Trump and Trump derangement syndrome, you don't care that it's happening to Donald Trump. In one sense, you got Hillary Clinton saying how great it is that he's facing 34 felony counts. You have another politician saying he's scary because he will utilize the system against political actors. And yet it is Donald Trump who's had the system will utilized against him. It is why we have to take a stand at the ACLJ, whether you fight, again, against the abortion that is on full display at the DNC yesterday, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's on display again some way and shape or form tonight. Shocking as the taking of unborn lives was celebrated at the Democrat National Convention. At the ACLJ, we are dedicated to defending life. It's why we launched our Life and Liberty Drive, where a group of ACLJ members have agreed to match your gifts. Now, as we battle the radical left's abortion agenda in courts nationwide, we need your support. Have your gift doubled today at ACLJ.org. Last night, we filed our lawsuit against the state of Massachusetts and the abortion industry that are smearing pro-life sinners, and we're preparing to launch a counter campaign on the ground there. We're battling our own cases at the U.S. Supreme Court to defend pro-life counselors and have filed another Supreme Court case to defund Planned Parenthood. We're assisting efforts to stop pro-abortion amendments in states and filing amicus briefs in state Supreme Courts to defend life. As abortion is disturbingly celebrated, I believe it will be again tonight at the DNC and throughout the week, we need you to stand with us. Our pro-life cases require immense resources. Your gift today takes a stand for life and helps save babies' lives, mothers as well. Have your gift doubled today at ACLJ.org. And if you want to talk to us on the phone about the first night of the DNC or what's coming up tonight in the DNC, give us a call at 1-800-684-3110. But I really encourage you folks, again, today, we know what's coming tonight with the Obamas. We know what's coming the third night with with Bill Clinton and the governor of Minnesota. There are always, too, some surprises thrown in as well. Will, so you've got the big names, but also always surprises. And then we'll play some of Joe Biden's bizarre remarks, too, in his speeches. So we'll get to that at 1-800-684-3110. If you want to talk to us on air, we've got phone lines open for you. Are you going to tune in tonight? Maybe you didn't tune in last night. Are you going to tune in tonight because it's like the political comeback of Barack Obama? Is he going to be as tough? Is he going to be as eloquent as he once was on these stages? That's what we're taking your calls about. Support our work. Double the impact of your donation today.
Campaign that Massachusetts, the government itself, launched against pregnancy resource centers. And those used to be called crisis pregnancy centers. Those are the centers that support women when they're making a determination about keeping their child. And they actually give them options. Not just abortion. That's not the only option. There are options that they can provide, and they can provide assistance even after the women have their babies. So Massachusetts launched this incredibly huge campaign that targets the crisis pregnancy centers and actually accuses them of being a public health threat and carrying out false and misleading advertisement. And not only that, but they're actively urging citizens to report PRCs to state law enforcement. So we, of course, jumped in and took action, and we are representing one of the PRCs, Your Options Medical Centers. We are stating that Massachusetts, of course, they can express their views. A government can express their views. But in the very recent case, the NRA case before the Supreme Court, they were clear in saying what a government cannot do, however, is use the power of the state to punish or suppress disfavored expression. And that's exactly what they're doing here in this case. They're actively going after pro-life resource centers pregnancy resource centers, because of their pro-life message, because of their religious beliefs. And they cannot do that. That violates the First Amendment, and it's impermissible viewpoint discrimination.
It's opening up a conversation with even like a kid that they're not really wanting to have or ready to have, and the state is doing it, and doing it in a way that feels nefarious and it feels dark and heavy. At the same time, now at the DNC, you have Planned Parenthood making the announcement that they're going to be having a bus out front that's providing free medical abortions and other services that will be offered there. It's a celebration of the destruction of life.
I know you guys talked about it yesterday, Will, but this idea that there's an abortion and vasectomy truck outside the DNC,
right?
This is not like it used to be in the past, where they still do like to put it broadly as reproductive rights, but the word abortion is used over and over and over again. And Cece, I want to go to Cece because Cece, we heard these personal stories of people that they went to, women that they went to, but the actual stories that they had weren't really abortion stories at all, which is what we get to when we say abortion distortion, or these misconception or misinformation about what abortion is really about, because their stories were, babies that had not survived the pregnancy. So, that would, of course, be covered under exceptions to remove those unfortunate situations. Even the woman who was claiming that a rape exception wouldn't apply to her ultimately was a situation where it was a miscarriage. That is the majority of Americans, and where Donald Trump is and the Republican Party is, CC, is protects those exceptions. And on miscarriages, doesn't even consider that an abortion.
Absolutely. And miscarriage, I'll be very clear about this. Miscarriages are not now, nor have they ever been considered an abortion under any legal, for any legal purposes. So all three of those examples were actually miscarriages. And so they don't even have to fall into an exception. Miscarriages have never been considered abortion for legal purposes.
Well, you take these actually, I'm going to use CC, because you take these women, this is the best they can find. And we'll see tonight. Maybe they've got people that have more direct experience with actual abortion, but they take these women who really don't even meet the definition of abortion, even with groups like ours at the American Center for Law and Justice, because of the exceptions that we support, and they find them to utilize them as these abortion advocates, when the truth is what they experienced and what they actually went through would not even be considered an abortion by a pro-life activist.
And you're exactly right. This is more of the abortion distortion. They like to spin it. They like to play on people's emotions, and they like to say things like, oh my gosh, what Trump and the Trump administration would do is absolutely come after women who have miscarriages, or if there is a life-threatening situation, which almost every state, I think every state has an exception for the life of the mother. And so what they're doing is they're playing on people's emotions, but they're using the exceptions to the rule. And so they're not, once again, playing fair or stating the facts.
I want to play for you, again, kind of how they set the stage for this, Will, so that people could see. This is Amanda Zurowski. And she takes charge at Donald Trump and why a second Trump term would be so dangerous. Take a listen, though, on why by 23.
Today, because of Donald Trump, more than 1 in 3 women of reproductive age in America lives under an abortion ban. A second Trump term would rip away even more of our rights. Passing a national abortion ban, letting states monitor pregnancies and prosecute doctors, restricting birth control and fertility treatments. We cannot let that happen.
All right, but in these situations, again, wasn't about birth control. It's not about again having a miscarriage, CC. But this is obviously, because we saw it today too in the backgrounds as they're preparing for tonight, that reproductive health is coming back again tonight.
Absolutely. They think this is what they can win on. This is an issue that they can win on. But again, they have to distort it. They have to spin it to be able to win it. And even when you hear what she just said, she talks as if abortion is a right. And the Supreme Court was very clear in the Dobbs decision that abortion is not a constitutional right. But guess what is? Life is a constitutional right. So they're spinning it once again, and they use it for, reproductive health care and access to reproductive health care. And that's not what this is about. This is protecting human life in the womb.
Well, and unfortunately for a Democrat Party that has the entire week of programming, they're deciding to move forward with a misinformation campaign about the reality of what it is. They are using 3 women last night that had traumatic in some cases, very horrific stories in their past, and they're using them as political pawns. And one, I don't think it's fair to them, regardless of their political beliefs, to be used as pawns in this way and to be put on that platform to spout misinformation. Like even in that bite we just played, none of that is reality about what the platform of the Republican Party or what President Donald Trump has even said himself about what he would do in his second term. So instead, they're using the traumatic instances of these women's lives and putting them on a stage and having them give that emotive political call to action on many things that aren't even reality. And that's the abortion distortion factor.
Right.
And they're using that on night one in prime time as their rallying cry.
Right. Not reality, because once again, miscarriages have never been considered an abortion. And also because these situations would fall into exceptions. The life of the mother is always an exception. And so, again, they're spinning it. They're using the abortion distortion, which is what the Democratic Party has to do in this situation with abortion.
I want to get to the phones, 1-800-684-3110. Let's go to Don in Texas on line 2. Hey, Don, welcome to Sekulow. You're on the air.
No, thank you. I just noticed a comment that was made a little bit ago about lawfare and the history of it. And the thing that occurs to me is if people weren't paying attention the first time when Obama was going after the Tea Party and all that kind of stuff with the IRS, they're likely not to remember it now. And now if they weren't paying attention then, they probably aren't paying attention now. That's part of the problem. So the collective memory disappears because nobody was paying attention the first time.
Well, and I think, again, that's why the ACLJ exists. It's one, to remind you that when they have a speaker that they put up, a state senator says, it's going to be Donald Trump who's going to weaponize the FBI against Democrats. When the FBI and the Department of Justice has been weaponized against Republicans for nearly a decade now, and we are still fighting those cases, whether we have to fight for whistleblowers, whether we have to fight for pro-life organizations that have been demonized, whether we have to fight against spies going inside Catholic, traditional Catholic churches and places of worship because they believe that's where domestic violent extremists have a fertile ground, and so they're going in and spying on churches. What we know is this. The Obama team weaponized the DOJ bureaucracy, not just political appointees, but bureaucracy against the political class, but also against grassroots Americans. What happened under President Trump was they took the politicization and weaponization of the Department of Justice and they turned it on the leading candidate for the Republican Party, who is still the nominee and has been a leader even after the second election when he did not retain his additional 4 years in office. And yet, will they have the gall to say it is Donald Trump who has those 34 felony convictions, who has cases still going on civilly in New York, who's got criminal cases in Georgia, who has these other criminal cases hanging over his head, Washington, D.C. and Florida. But it is Donald Trump who they say will bring lawfare to Washington. It was the Democrats who brought lawfare to Washington, D.C.
That's right. And that's why the ACLJ is here and why we're not going away, is because we've been fighting this battle for a long time. Whether it be misinformation coming out of the Massachusetts government against pregnancy resource centers, or whether it be the targeting of the deep state against conservatives and Christians across the country. Join today, Life and Liberty Drive, ACLJ.org. Fight with us.
Last summer, we launched our first ever ACLJ Life and Liberty Drive. We never could have imagined how much you, our ACLJ members and ACLJ champions, would exceed our expectations, and we can't thank you enough. We'd love to tell you that 1 year later, threats to life and liberty are no more. Sadly, the radical left is relentlessly doing everything it can to destroy the very foundations of this great nation: life, religious liberty, and the Constitution. The good news is your ACLJ team has not slowed down. We continue to fight in courtrooms across the country, including the Supreme Court, to defend your freedoms and to save innocent babies. And we're proud to announce the return of the ACLJ Life and Liberty Drive. Right now, your tax-deductible gift will be doubled, dollar for dollar, doubling your impact to defend your freedoms and help save innocent lives. Go to aclj.org right now and join us in this fight.
keeping you informed and engaged. Now more than ever. This is Sekulow. And now your host, Jordan Sekulow.
All right, so we know what night one was full of at the DNC. We had, of course, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, a state senator, three people who actually didn't need abortions because they had miscarriages, so the actual procedure utilized would not be considered an abortion. They wouldn't even fall under the three exceptions for abortion because they'd fall outside the definitions of even lawful abortions in states with very real restrictions on abortions. Children who have died in the womb, and these pregnancies that, again, that's not an abortion. The idea that the situation involving the rape, a horrible story, but she also miscarried before having an abortion. That's not something that they would even fall under abortion. And there's always the exception for rape that pro-life activists and activists like us at the ACLJ are supporting, not because that is the mass amount, Will, or the norm when it comes to abortion. They tried to make it last night. Right. But those are the exceptions for a reason, and why they are the exceptions that we support as well.
That's right. And I think we should get to the phones here and get back to what the people thought. And if you watched last night, if you have comments on it, call us at 1-800-684-3110. We're going to go to line 3. Mike is calling from New Jersey. Mike, you're on Sekulow.
Hey, Mike, you there? Looks like Mike's not there.
All right, we're going to go to Michael calling from Florida on line 4. Michael, you're on the air.
My perception is from the get-go of this administration, meaning back when we had Biden in the bunker, we have been experiencing the great deception. And my question is, with regards to Kamala and what she is looking towards, I don't see any way that the party is going to allow her to do the debate, because once she does that, everything will be exposed.
Well, I think this is where we are, really, Mike. I think we will, this week, it's for Kamala Harris to get through. Okay? If you get through this week and do decent, which is how low the bar is for her, Will, if she does decent this week, it's not that we're going to be talking about, I don't think, her convention speech a month from now. But if it's not the typical Harris who makes statements that are just kind of don't make sense or that clearly are flubs, but she comes off as stronger or sometimes how more with it, she can change the narrative of the presidential race. That's about it. I think that's all she can do with this speech. She can either make matters worse for herself by kind of being the same old Kamala Harris that we've seen that's been kind of awkward on the campaign trail,
right?
Bizarre in the way she talks on the campaign trail, not really with it on the campaign trail. Or it could be the Kamala Harris that people have got imagined in their head, or at least like me believed was the Kamala Harris who was the Attorney General of California and a prosecutor in California and a U.S. Senator who could speak their mind without feeling like they were about to have a nervous breakdown.
That's right. And once again, this will be a teleprompter speech. It will be in front of a large crowd, but I do believe that they are planning on this being a big moment for her. Yeah. And they are making sure that all of those safeguards for their candidate are in place, whether it be rehearsal time on the speech, well in advance copy, any revisions done well in advance. And then obviously it's on teleprompter. She's given many of these speeches before. So I don't think that the DNC is going to be a moment that people are like, who is this candidate? Why are they running this person? But once again, as the caller pointed out, and I disagree with the caller, I do believe she will debate on September 10th. They both agreed to it. I don't think politically there's any way for her at this point to pull out of that.
Something else happen.
So I think it'll happen, and that will be a bigger moment in the campaign when the two of them face off as compared to the DNC speech that we'll see later this week.
Right, folks, we'll continue to take your calls. 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. But I want you to have your gift doubled today at ACLJ.org. Late last night, we filed our lawsuit against the state of Massachusetts and the abortion industry that are smearing pro-life centers, and we're preparing to launch that counter campaign we need your financial support for. Donate online right now, part of our Life and Liberty Drive, where your donation is doubled at ACLJ.org. Let's send a message to those delegates at the Democrat National Convention.
Overnight, a passing of the torch. President Biden delivering a rousing endorsement of his vice president.
Are you ready to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz?
Been a fair amount of discord and incoherence in the Democratic Party campaign, with the bad debate performance by President Biden and the subsequent efforts to get him to acknowledge the fact that he had gotten old and he was dragging the Democratic Party down. So there had to be a moment where the torch could get passed.
Last night was really like just watching an alternative reality. They're pushing lies about President Trump, and they're not acknowledging the issues that matter to voters at home. Inflation, immigration. They did not acknowledge how they're going to tackle the border crisis. They didn't acknowledge that Kamala Harris is responsible for the inflation crisis that Americans are suffering from.
It's really sad to see, to try to pretend as if Kamala Harris is not currently your vice president, like they're going to have some type of change when they are pushing the same agenda that they're running and campaigning on. I don't believe the American people are going to fall for this.
This is a vote about the policies that will shape the future of our nation. And if they want more of inflation, runaway immigration, a mess all over the world, it's simple. Vote for Harris. If they'd like to get back where they can afford bread, butter, bacon, vote for Donald Trump.
The thing about Kamala Harris to understand, Sean, is that she's not just ideological, it's that she bends the knee to that far left wing. Her first presidential style decision was who was she going to make her vice president. She passed over Shapiro, she went with Walz, and I think that says a lot about how she's going to govern. So whether or not you think she has an ideology, and for all I know, she may not, she's a cog in a wheel, it shows who actually is pulling her strings, and it is that far-left progressive wing of the Democratic Party. That's what ought to be most concerning.
Back to Sekulow. We are taking your calls to 1-800-684-3110. We're going to get to those in a moment. We've got Rick Grenell joining us now. Of course, Rick, who served in the Trump cabinet. He's also served in political campaigns. And so, Rick, I guess just right off the bat, I want to get your thoughts on the first night of the Democrat National Convention. Joe Biden, who gave a very late speech that I think most people had probably already shut off their TVs for, even if they were kind of interested to see what he had to say about being moved out of the presidency or walking the party line, which he ultimately did. But I just want your reaction to that first night of the DNC, because I think it's kind of a preview of how it's going to escalate each night.
Look, it was right out of the gate. It was far left woke. I mean, they even had the governor of Kentucky, who's supposed to be a moderate, completely going crazy left woke. I think what the reality is even when conservatives or moderates get in front of this Democrat crowd, the mob, far left, radical, communist, fascists in that room completely overtake people. They can't speak truth to power. Politicians like Governor Beshear showed up and immediately knelt to the far left. And this is what's scary to me, is that when you look at, tampons in boys' bathrooms and the inability to say that a woman is a woman, and then trying to cut red meat because it's bad for climate change and the open border. I mean, you just look at the Democratic Party of today, and it's scary. It doesn't have any common sense, and it's chasing the moderates right out of the party. Independents are abandoning this party, and it's on full display all week in Chicago.
I want to play this bite from Biden. And, this is, again, it was a misstatement. He didn't catch himself, though. And it kind of is the truth.
That's right. Yes. So President Biden last night, Rick, he showed up later than probably he was expecting or hoping for. But what we saw was, when this campaign has been pushing that they're bringing back joy, we saw a night full of yelling and a lot of angry faces at the DNC last night. But President Biden, giving his kind of farewell to the party speech, made this misstatement, but I want to get your take on it, because did he accidentally tell the truth? Maybe one of the first truths at the DNC last night. Let's play bite 3.
When Donald Trump left office, and unlike Trump, we will not demonize immigrants, saying they're the poison of blood of America, poison the blood of our country. Kamala and I are committed to strengthening legal immigration, including protecting dreamers and more.
You know, so again, this idea that they're going to strengthen the immigration laws, Rick. It's a lot of gaslighting in that speech too, because the actions haven't been done. Whether you support liberal policies on the immigration or not, the only actions they've taken are actions that have made America less safe on the southern border. So more drugs flow in and more bad actors come in the country.
Look, I'm not sure that he is making a mistake there, because I live in California, and the entire state is a sanctuary state, a really nice name for a terrible idea, which is you get to break immigration law and be protected against punishment and enforcement of breaking that law in a city or a state. So throughout California, you can ignore federal law when it comes to immigration and not be punished, because we are a sanctuary to being punished. And it's really an outrageous concept that I think too many conservatives have allowed to continue. But remember, you have a party in California that Kamala has been the head of that wants health care and driver's license to illegals. They want to move to allow illegals to vote. This is a system that is not going to work in the Midwest. As soon as people find out exactly what Kamala Harris wants, what the far left woke San Francisco radicals want, they're going to run from this. And Joe Biden, I think, slipped up, but I'm not sure that it was a mistake as much as it was in his head. This is what he believes, which is we're going to normalize being illegal in America.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Bobby in New York on line 6. Take that call while Rick is on the air with us. Hey, Bobby, welcome to Sekulow. You're on the air.
Hi, from Niagara Falls on the American side, and I just made a small contribution of $25, which I do occasionally. And hi, Will. Hi, Jordan. My question is that I'm very worried that these guys are so good at propaganda and they're so convincing that I'm worried that it's going to harm the Trump campaign in a major way, in the sense that it's going to put Trump way behind. What do you guys think? And thanks for everything.
Rick, I don't think that anybody's ever going to be way behind. I think Joe Biden had hit probably the max of how far he'd be behind. It was still within striking distance. It was just getting a little bit out of hand for the Biden campaign and Democrats, so they thought they needed to switch to someone else and kind of restart this campaign with Harris. What we do know is it's going to be a very close election. Both sides are well-funded. That Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and his entire campaign have had to retool, just like the DNC is retooling as well, but retool their statements, retool their attacks, because they are dealing against a very different top-of-the-ticket nominee.
Look, I think there's no question that the Democrats have the media in their pocket, and they're going to continue pushing lies, pretending like somehow the border is closed, that we don't have wars, and that inflation is not a problem. Last night, the word inflation was only mentioned 3 times throughout the entire evening. So they don't want to talk about those issues, and so they're going to spin this. But I think it's going to take a whole bunch of money to convince the American people and convince independents that somehow gas prices are not high, that grocery prices are not high, that we don't have wars. I mean, they have to literally suspend reality in order to get what they want. And I think that's going to be too expensive. The American people see it, independents see it, and I think that they're going to be in a really terrible position to try to spin their way out of it.
Rick, I wanted to follow up on that, actually, because according to some analysis, inflation was only mentioned about 3 times last night. And when Kamala Harris decided to make her very first policy speech on Friday, which was panned by CNN and the Washington Post as terrible idea on price controls that she wants to put in place on to help combat inflation, because the greedy grocery store chains are out of control. But when you almost thought that was going to be kind of the lead-off theme of the DNC, when she was able to captivate the media cycle starting on Friday going into this convention, and instead it was mostly about abortion last night, and it seems that may be the continuing theme throughout the rest of the week. But what was your take on that? She gives this huge policy speech about this is where we're going, and then it's almost completely ignored on the first night of the convention.
Well, I don't think that they have much to talk about when it comes to job creation or how to combat inflation. I mean, Kamala is left to try to say on day one, I'm going to do something about how high prices are and how terrible the economy is, except she was part of making the decision. We were told that she was the last one that Joe Biden would talk to before he would make these decisions, and she broke the tie in the Senate. She broke it in favor of spending massively, government spending, which creates inflation. And so she's got a very difficult time to run away as the vice president from these policies, but yet she's trying to spin her way out with a lot of help from the media. And again, I go back to, they're going to have to spend a whole bunch of money to try to tell us that things are okay and that somehow Kamala is equipped to make them better.
Rick, we'll go back to you throughout the week, especially as we lead up to the Harris speech to the nation, which I think is the most important part about these conventions, is getting to know the person running for president, especially when on one side you have someone who is not the incumbent president of the United States. She's been a vice president. Her speeches have not gone great. A lot of word salad, a lot of confusing statements, a lot of contradicting views that they will put out even on that economic message. So we'll definitely want to come back to you, Rick, and we appreciate you being part of our team. And folks, as the abortion industry is disturbingly celebrated at the Democrat National Convention this week, we need you to stand with us. Our pro-life cases do require immense resources. Your gift today takes a stand for life and helps saves babies' lives. Have your gift doubled today at ACLJ.org. Because think about this. Late last night, we filed our lawsuit against the state of Massachusetts and the abortion industry that are smearing pro-life centers, and we are preparing to launch an actual counter campaign, an advertising campaign to counter the Massachusetts advertising campaign, which has targeted pro-life pregnancy centers. We're battling our own case at the U.S. Supreme Court to defend pro-life counselors, and have filed another Supreme Court case to defund Planned Parenthood. And while we're assisting efforts to stop pro-abortion amendments in the states and filing amicus briefs in state Supreme Courts to defend life. But we need you. The resources this industry has, the abortion industry, are endless, especially when they partner with the federal government on their side. Remember, a Trump administration would not be partnering with the pro-abortion industry the way that they get to partner with Democrats. So we need your financial support. We need you to be part of our Life and Liberty Drive. Double the impact of your donation today at ACLJ.org. Make that donation today. Again, let's fight back against the party of abortion, the party of death. Go to ACLJ.org right now. Take part in our Life and Liberty Drive and make sure our counter campaign is bigger than their campaign.
For months, they told us, Bidenomics worked. Everything is great. The economy is the best in the world. But then at the same time, Kamala Harris had to give an economic policy speech as the very first thing she rolled out policy-wise for her campaign. So those two things don't square right away of, if everything's great, why do you need to unveil new policy? But what was your take? And you're a professor of law and economics. Your expertise, I know we bring you on about many topics regarding the law, but when the economy starts to be the topic of conversation, we know we got to go to Professor Hutchison. What was your take when you heard the speech and you're sitting there and like, really?
She doesn't seem to understand reality, and she doesn't understand who causes inflation. It's government policy and the Federal Reserve's willingness to print money. So if we take government out of the equation, guess what? Prices are likely to remain flat. That's number one. And then number two, if we return to Trump economic policies, including energy independence, guess what? Prices are likely to fall. So one of the things that we should keep in mind is that Kamala Harris doesn't understand that her policies would actually worsen things. As a commentator recently pointed out, if you look at Venezuela, if you look at Cuba, if you look at the Soviet Union, what has happened? We've had shortages, and in Venezuela, people have been reduced to eating zoo animals. So I think her policies are a huge mistake, and most left-wing commentators basically understand that. She does not.
All right, welcome back to Sekulow. So tonight, again, just to prep you, we're gonna hear from the Obamas, Michelle and Barack Obama. I'm sure others, but that is the major primetime speech. It will be interesting to see how in the weeds Barack Obama gets in the dirt when it goes, in the sand trap, if you will, in the sandbox, in the dirt with Donald Trump. And does he go after Donald Trump, or is he really just promoting Joe Biden and thus Kamala Harris? And that will be, again, very interesting to see. Also, what is Michelle Obama's role? She usually, again, when she speaks on issues, it's usually not so politicized, which is what leads to her kind of national popularity. She's left that to her husband. But when you're speaking at a Democrat national convention, your husband's not on the ballot, you would imagine that there are going to be political barbs inside her prepared remarks, because why would you even though she's so popular, you don't want her speaking and taking up time if she's not prepared to do that. Let's go to the phones, Will.
That's right. We're going to go to David calling on line 1 in California. David, you're on Sekulow.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. If I may, I have a comment and a question. Comment is President Trump didn't ban abortion, right? He just took it away from the federal government and gave it to the states individually as it should be, correct?
Yes.
Well, and actually, it was the Supreme Court.
It wasn't Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump put Supreme Court nominees in place, but it was justices on the Supreme Court who ultimately overturned Roe versus Wade and took the issue out of the federal government and put it to the states.
Right. Okay. And that's kind of what I meant, but wasn't wholly sure. My question is, the abortion issue is that, am I paying with that with my tax money?
So it's interesting, Will. I mean,
right.
we don't pay for it internationally, but what we see is that Planned Parenthood gets about $500 million a year in federal taxes. And even if that money cannot be used directly to pay for abortions, what it opens up is they raise another about $500,000 a year. So that $500,000 they raise, because they're getting $500,000 from the U.S. government, that can't go to abortion specifically. So the other $500,000, it gets offset, and they've got about $500,000 to perform. And that's why that abortion truck can go around Chicago.
Right. So the industry of abortion is billions of dollars a year in the United States. Planned Parenthood gets federal taxpayer dollars for the other services they say they provide. If you look at their annual report, they try to claim that abortion is a very small percentage of what they do. It's not reality. They put on their annual report, if a person comes in, checks in, then goes through a normal screening process, those are all services they're providing. So they try to beef up their numbers. But they also try to say that the federal dollars aren't paying directly for abortion, when in reality, because money is fungible, if they have to worry a lot less about covering other things at their clinics, they can provide a lot more abortions. And that's the reality of it. So they would claim your taxpayer dollars aren't directly paying for abortions, but the fact that they are getting $500 million a year from the federal government, it's definitely helping that industry.
Yeah, let's go to Susan in Maryland on line 3. Hey, Susan, welcome to Sekulow. You're on the air.
Yes, I wanted your feedback on the convention. Does not look natural to me. It looks like the Academy Awards show of leftist ideas. The states are not being recognized. The labor is only recognized by the labor unions, and it appears to me like they're disenfranchising a huge audience.
But you know what? That huge audience of delegates didn't have to do this, Susan. That's why the Democrat Party is a much better organized party. You say it's whether or not it's orchestrated and produced. It absolutely is. But they've got a hold will on their delegates. So when they needed those delegates to go from Biden to Harris, it was really no issue.
That's right. And Susan is 100% correct that it doesn't feel natural and that it feels like the states are disenfranchised.
Because a weird speech last night, too, by Joe Biden.
Right.
Because he got up there, sounded tough, sounded kind of with it, and yet he's being forced out aggressively by his own party, even though he's the one that, in quotes, beat Donald Trump.
That's right. And you see the awkward video of Nancy Pelosi chanting, "We love Joe" in the crowd with everyone, when she is the one who helped orchestrate the coup against him with Chuck Schumer and the Obamas. The fact of it not feeling natural is correct, because it's not a natural process for the Democrats. They decided to skip the primary season and then force out their their candidate who went through primaries. There were votes cast for Joe Biden to be the nominee again and replaced him with the vice president who to date has not received votes
conference in 30 days.
For that office. That's right. 30 days, no press conference, not getting one this week. She's got a big speech to plan for. Let's go to Tim calling on line 4 in Colorado. Tim, you're on Sekulow.
Hi. Yeah, my question is, how is the DNC able to pick Kamala Harris and Trump state law requiring a primary to be put on the ballot in November?
Well, I think, listen, they would love to put this on ballots in November. And that's because we have failed so far on the pro-life cause. When we've had ballot initiatives, things have not gone great. When it's been legislators who are elected by the majority in their districts, but it's more of a constitutional Republican. It's not just all of us going to vote. We have seen statutes go in to protect life. Where we have seen the pro-life movement fail so far has been when there's been a pro-life amendment or a pro-abortion amendment proposed to a state's laws or constitutions and getting beat, even in states that are red, 60-40, because it's just like the stories of those women that they put up last night, none of which would have fallen outside of the exceptions that all Republicans, at least in Washington, D.C., and most elected Republicans, including President Trump, have said they will always make sure any restrictions whatsoever on abortion is that will not be in place for, again, the life of the mother, for rape, or for incest. And we know out of all three of these, it ended up being that the children were stillborn. And so, again, that's not rape, Will, to remove the body, which is no longer alive.
That's right. And as you see the issues that they are bringing up, they are, once again, putting forward misinformation. That's something that they claim that the Republicans are doing. They tried to put in a misinformation czar. We see that in Massachusetts, they're running a misinformation campaign against pregnancy resource centers, and that's what we're fighting back against. Regardless of the attacks that come from the left, they are never going to play fair against conservative ideology and conservative values. They are going to find a way to beat it no matter what. And that's why organizations like the ACLJ exist, is so that we can fight back. We're a grassroots organization. We represent members of the ACLJ from all over the country that have conservative ideology, that have conservative beliefs, that are founded in Judeo-Christian values. That's why we fight, because we know that the federal government is weaponized against those very values. We know that the FBI was putting spies inside churches. And what was one of their big concerns? That the issue of abortion was going to be a big deal in the run-up to this election. And why do we know that they thought it was a big deal? Well, the DNC is making it a big deal. They put it as the showcase of night one at the DNC, and they're going to be doing it every other night as well. We will not stop fighting for the truth, and we will continue to fight, and that's why you need to join our Life and Liberty Drive today.
We're assisting efforts to stop pro-abortion amendments in states. We are filing amicus briefs in states and Supreme Courts to defend life. We are bringing our own U.S. Supreme Court case to defend life and pro-life counselors, and have filed another Supreme Court case to defund Planned Parenthood. Last night, we filed our lawsuit against the state of Massachusetts and the abortion industry. Here's what I need you to do. I need you to make a donation to the ACLJ. We need you right now, because we're not just going to do this case in Massachusetts that we've walked you through kind of the charges we like to bring. We're going to work on the civil side of this case. We are also going to work on a counter campaign in Massachusetts. What does that mean? That means ads, fundraising, whether it's web ads, whether it's ads, billboards, whether it's TV ads. We need your financial support to do that. Donate today at aclj.org.